Hey everyone, welcome to County Cocktails and specifically to the Heartwood Farm and Cidery, where they grow their own vegetables, house their own farm animals, and make their own cideries. So let's go meet Brent and he'll tell us a little bit more about their business.
So my family and I moved out to the farm from Toronto about 17 years ago. And we did so because my wife Val had a real passion to farm and had always envisioned that she'd be doing that at some point in her life. So we came out here, and that's when we established the herd of cattle. Was kind of one of our first things that we did, and got into other sort of small scale livestock from there. And somewhere along the line, I became quite enamored of fruit trees and thought it'd be nice to put a bit of an orchard onto the farm. So we started planting some of the trees that you see here and have been adding to that orchard ever since. That was probably about 9 or 10 years ago. And then about 5 years ago, we started thinking, you know, what are we gonna do with this fruit if we ever actually get fruit off these trees? And that's when Bill and I, Bill the mixologist that you'll meet, started talking about hard cider. Bill is a great fan of all things fermented and an infectious person in that sense, and so we kind of caught the vibe and started making cider. And so Heartwood Farm and Cidery was born at that time, and yeah, we've been doing this for the past 4 years. We'll be starting our 5th year very shortly, and yeah, loving it. So Heartwood Farm, like the broader farm, is a regenerative farm. And by regenerative, what we mean is that it's a farm whose primary concern is rebuilding soil, enriching the soil, deepening the organic matter in the soil, actually growing the layer of topsoil. And there are many ways in which we do that, but one of the ways that we do it is through biodiversity, right? So making sure that we've got a wide array of plants and animals that all kind of are existing in cooperation with each other. And so those values very naturally extend to the way we make products. Like we think about the products we make as being the output of a healthy farm system. Now, our farm is quite small at the end of the day, and so it doesn't produce enough material for us to make all of our ciders and all that kind of stuff. So that leads very naturally into a collaboration with other farmers that share those values. And so we're always looking for other local producers who can contribute to the products that we make. So for example, we have a cider we call Current Affair. So this is a black currant infused cider, very much inspired by the currants that are growing in abundance over there. But we have good friends at Andrew's farm just down the road from here that grow currants commercially. And so inspired by the stuff that we grew here, we're able to actually source that material those ingredients at scale from a neighborhood farm. And we actually run a program called Food, Folks and Farms, which is just kind of it's a storytelling thing that we do in our newsletter inside our community, where we're always looking to, you know, throw as much love as we can to some of these other collaborators. And the collaborators are agricultural, but there also are organizations that we collaborate with to produce stuff. So for example, we've just started working with Chef Scott, right, who's a fellow in Guelph, who's making new kind of recipes that are inspired by things that we grow, and we contribute ingredients to some of his formulations. And working with Rutham's, which is a packing facility to sort of come up with interesting recipes, you know, for which we can supply the ingredients. So very quickly, you wind up in a situation where you've got a ton of collaborators and friends and people who are working in cooperation with each other to bring beautiful local food and drink to market. So yeah, there are kind of two aspects to the business. So one is the products we make, so maple syrup, honey, cider, and we're always experimenting with new things there. So we have a vinaigrette that's going to be coming up that's made with apple cider that we've created that we actually turn into vinegar. and that becomes one of the key ingredients. We have just launched a new non-alcoholic cider that we call Sparkle, and we see that as actually being part of what will eventually hopefully be a bunch of different non-alcoholic, sparkling, refreshing, farm-inspired products. So on the product side, there's a number of new things coming up. And then on the other aspect of the business is experiential. And so a couple of new things coming up this summer. One is that we're putting up some prospector tents, and we'll be making those available to people who are looking not only for a getaway, but who are looking to connect with a farm system, sort of share in the story, participate in some of the experiences. Val is a wonderful animator, and so people who come out will be invited to sort of get, augment their stay with a little bit of learning, a little bit of experience. And so that's coming up as well. Then maybe the last thing to tell you about is that we will be inviting small groups of people, sort of health regulations permitting. We'll be inviting small groups of people to come out for kind of a more immersive experience, right? So whether it's kind of learning about livestock and experiencing the new piglets, or whether it's about learning how to make hard cider, or learning how to milk a cow. Those sorts of things. So we're going to be creating these experiences that kind of revolve around experiences that we can offer here at the farm, because we've found that so many people are looking for ways to connect not only to a rural landscape, but also to the source from which their food and their drinks come from. So everything that we've got to say should be said at heartwoodfarm.ca. So that's HEARTWOODFARM.ca. And all of our products there are available in our store, and we deliver them anywhere in Ontario. And all of our experiences that we're offering will be listed there as well.
Thanks, Brent, for telling us a little bit about what the farm does and how beautiful it really is. But here's the thing though. Growing an apple tree, it's kind of difficult to do. You can't just expect to put a gala seed in the ground and then have a gala tree actually grow from that seed. They're completely unpredictable and unique. Apple trees are frustrating to grow, and you can't just plant a tree and then get a good harvest in that first year. In fact, it takes upwards to 3 to 5 years to actually get a good harvest from a tree. So being an apple orchard and growing apples for cider or for apple juice, it can be a really difficult process, and it takes a lot of different techniques. Cideries such as this one and other apple orchards have found different techniques like grafting, which is essentially merging 2 trees into one to really kind of grow the species of tree that they want to grow. With that in mind though, apple trees, cideries, all of that have been a part of Canadian history for as long as European settlers were actually coming to Canada from France and England. A lot of these families, they would bring their own heritage and heirloom apples to grow their own orchards on their land. In Wellington County and Erin specifically, you could see orchards of apple trees everywhere in the community. Lots of people would grow about ½ an acre to an acre of their land with just apple trees. And nurseries really started to pop up in the area as well. And they would have a lot of different types of fruit trees, apples, pears, whatever you can really think of. They would actually grow them and sell them to people in the community. In Guelph in about 1850, they had a nursery that was very well known in the area, and they would sell a bunch of flowers and shrubs and all of that. But their main source of income came from different types of fruit trees. If you wanted an apple tree, you could buy a single apple tree for about 25 cents, or if you wanted a full orchard, you could buy bulk orders of about 100 apple trees for $25. So it really wasn't that uncommon to ride around the county, ride around Erin Township and find these farms that had their own apple trees. Many of them would grow a pretty decent harvest, so after they made their own personal cideries, they could take all that overstock and sell it in market. So they could make a little bit of extra cash along the side. So it was kind of really great to see a lot of these local farms growing their own apple trees, making their own hard ciders, and making a pretty decent profit off of that. But what happens when the temperance unions start sticking their fingers into those lovely businesses, and when their movement seems to be a real big trouble? But before we get into that, I think we should go visit Bill and see what he's shaking up.
Hi, I'm Bill Whitehead. I'm one of the partners here at Heartwood Farm and Cidery. We're going to try a cocktail today. A lot of cocktails use citrus as a central element, and we wanted to try and find a way to play around with the idea of using some local ingredients instead to get that sourness and those sour notes. So I'm going to show you a cocktail that does that, and we're literally in the zone when we do this. This is called sorrel, and it kind of looks like spinach. It's kind of related to the rhubarb, but it's got those sour notes, and it also has some tannins, so nice pucker to that. So we're going to use some sorrel, and for this, it's called Green Acres is the name of our cocktail. So we've got gin, some sorrel, and some of our hoppity. So we're kind of celebrating some of the botanical flavors that we have. So grab a generous amount of sorrel leaves. You can get these, they grow great in this zone. 3 Beats to the Wind is a local farm that also has rhubarb and sorrel if you wanted to use that. We're going to use these, stems are okay, but ideally not. It's not the same as a mint for a mojito. The leaves are a little bit more kind of spinachy. So we're going to chiffonade these a little bit. And this is just kind of, you twist it into a cigar shape and then you can break it down a little bit. You want to reserve a little bit for your garnish, but that's probably a good amount to really get a lot of the green out. So we're going to take a couple ounces of gin. Some ice. And instead of muddling in a glass like you would with a mojito, we're going to let the ice do the work to break this down a little bit. And that's going to draw out all of the tannins and the chlorophylls and that kind of stuff. And because these leaves are really like kind of breaking down before our eyes, a mint's a lot harder, but hardier. But these leaves kind of are a little more fragile, so we're going to pour it through a strainer here. And we got that nice green color coming out. And then you've got the gin botanicals working, so not like picking up those rosemary and juniper, that kind of thing. And then we have a hoppity cider, so we're using some local hops from Puslich area, and we're gonna obviously the apple cider. So this is about a 6.8% cider, and we're going to just pour that up so it's carbonated. Oh yeah, I forgot the ice. We'll top it up with some more ice. Nice highball. A little bit of stuff on the side there. And that is your Green Acres.
So it's a good thing that Bill was actually able to make this wonderful Green Acres cocktail, because for a while there, because of these temperance unions, it really didn't seem like this was going to happen. And the fingers that these temperance unions were getting into Erin Township's businesses and local farms was getting extremely frustrating. So a lot of distilleries in the area and other parts of Ontario, they had connections with local farms in Erin Township. And some of the monopolies that were in Toronto and Windsor, such as Gooderham and Warts, they were tied very deeply to Wellington County, specifically Hillsburg. So Gooderham and Warts had about 100 acres of land within the little hamlet of Hillsburg in the 1850s, and they had a lot of input with the community. I mean, they had built their Gooderham mill on that land, they had a store in the area, they even actually had a cooperage in Hillsburg that helped to bring down the costs when they were making their barrels for their liquor back in Toronto. So they had a huge input inside of their community. And then if you think about Hillsburg and the enormity of the hotels that were in that area, having access to alcohol, liquor, bar rooms was imperative. A lot of these hotels would invite locals to come in for a drink or two after they'd finished their job and wanted to just settle down and relax. Having a bar room in a local hotel was extremely important. Places like the Exchange and the Grand Central Hotel, they only existed because they had bar rooms. So with the Temperance Union getting more and more involved with the community and having a bigger voice, you can imagine how fearful they would have been if Prohibition was put into play in Ontario. So eventually Prohibition was put into play, unfortunately, locally in Wellington County. It was enacted in 1884, and then provincially it eventually was enacted during the First World War in 1916. And the local hotels, cideries, wineries, distilleries, all of them felt the ramifications of this new Prohibition law. And really it's kind of vague in some spots. I mean, if you really look at the law, if you made a beer, the beer was legal as long as the alcohol limit was under 2.5%. Wineries were still able to grow their grapes and make wine and sell it outside of the province legally, but nothing was really talked about with the cideries or apples or orchards or anything like that, although it is fairly common to hear stories of how heritage and heirloom trees were uprooted from where they were growing in their local orchards. And I mean, that kind of destroyed the business, it destroyed the cideries. Did this stop people from making their own liquor, selling their own liquor? Absolutely not. I mean, in a lot of cases it would have been illegal. You weren't really allowed to sell alcohol in the province, but that didn't stop other provinces trying to get their liquor in. I mean, a very important story is Quebec, specifically Montreal. They wanted to sell their liquor into Ontario, and they made moves to specifically help Ontarians get away from it and avoid the law to get their liquor into Ontario. And then if you were caught with liquor that was over the illegal alcohol limits, they would just feign ignorance. So John Horton tried to do this. He was caught with a beer in hand that had a 6.3 alcohol content, which was about 4% over the legal limit at the time, and he just tried to feign ignorance. Essentially what he said to the court was that there was absolutely no way to know how much alcohol was in his beer. There was no way for him to test it because it was legal to drink beer at the time. But did the court sympathize with him? Nah. They completely bombarded him with a fine of $200 that he had to pay to the court for this small infraction. And you know what? It's not that uncommon for people to get in trouble for having alcohol over the legal limit. So of course Prohibition didn't stick around for too long in Ontario. It was repealed in 1927, which allowed people who distill different types of liquor, make beer, make wine, they had a perfectly okay time just trying to recreate their businesses. Where the trouble comes in is with our poor cideries. Like was mentioned before, you can't just plant a tree and expect a good harvest in that first year. And you can't plant a sapling and expect a good tree in a short amount of time. It takes about 10 years for a mature apple tree to fully grow. And then again, it takes another 3 to 5 years before you get a good apple harvest. So the entire business of making a cidery had a really hard time for a very long time because they just couldn't make their trees, they couldn't make their apples. So it's places like the Heartwood Farm and Cidery that are reintroducing people into this wonderful drink that is very delicious, it's refreshing, and it's allowing people to explore an alcohol that almost disappeared because of those pesky prohibitionists. And now that we're able to have ciders again, we can make these lovely drinks just like the Green Acres that Bill made us. So let's have a taste. Yep, that's really refreshing. So I suggest you come down here to Erin Township and you visit the Heartwood Farm and Cidery because it is delicious.
So it's rhubarb season, so here's another one. We're going to celebrate the rhubarb. It's local. When you have a lot of a harvest, you want to preserve it. So I'm going to walk through a couple of different ways that you can hang on to your rhubarb and enjoy it later if you want, or you can enjoy it right away. The first thing that you can do with rhubarb is juice it if you have a juicer. That's the most immediate way that you can get the benefits. Here's some rhubarb that we pulled up just now. And another thing you can do is to make a simple syrup. And a simple syrup traditionally is half sugar and half water. It's very easy to make. You just bring it to a boil and put it into a bottle, throw it in the fridge, keeps forever. What we're going to try here is we're going to make a simple syrup, but with juice instead of the water. So I'm not going to be cooking it right now, but I can say all you do is you get your rhubarb and you break it down enough that you can basically stew it. So you break it into chunks, kind of like, you know, this kind of size. And you get enough of it, throw it in a pot, and let it come to a boil. And you can run it through a sieve after. However much you have. This is the kind, I don't measure anything in advance, so I'll throw it into a pot, bring it to a boil with the lid on, low heat for about an hour, and then I'll put it through the strainer, and then whatever juice is left from that, you can add an equal part in weight or volume of sugar. You can bring the sugar down quite a bit if you want, and that'll make it a little more tart, but it won't keep as long, or you can keep the sugar high. You want to keep this in the fridge so that it doesn't get any kind of molds, or even better, you can put it into an ice cube tray and freeze it, and then kind of take it out later and keep it in a bag or something like that, and then you can just pop a little cube of your harvest into whatever you want. This is what it looks like after it's finished. So you got a nice ruby color, and so it's going to serve as an idea. So if you wanted to do an alcohol-free version of this drink, you can use the syrup. But in this case, we're going to use our rhubarb and make it into a vodka infusion. So I'm using vodka for our base alcohol for this, and what it does is it kind of draws out a lot of the flavors and a lot of the overtones of the rhubarb, and because it's not cooked, it's a lot sharper and brighter. So I kind of like prefer this, and it ends up being a lot drier too. So all you basically do is take however much rhubarb you want, you throw it into a jar, just for a demo here. You could fill this jar if you wanted. You pour your vodka over top, and then you basically cover it up, let it go for a week or so. You're gonna see the color start to drain out of the rhubarb, and that's kind of how you know when it's done. And all of that flavor ends up going into the vodka that's left over. So this is kind of like what it looks like when it's done. You can do this with anything. Like I've got a sour cherry tree. I can't wait to do that with that. And so there's a lot of different flavors you can get by infusing vodka. And again, the vodka is a neutral flavor, so it's only gonna be the fruit that you're tasting coming out of all that. And then we're going to make our drink. So this is the Ruby Sparkle. We're gonna grab our infused vodka, take a couple of ounces of this, and if you were doing the alcohol-free version, you could get a couple of ounces of your rhubarb simple syrup. So that goes in there, and then very simply, you have your ice, lots of ice, and then you can top it up with the Heartwood Sparkle. You could also use soda water. That's what a lot of people do as well. Or a tonic water would be nice. Sometimes I like to take a little piece of rhubarb and dip it in sugar, just like I used to have when I was a kid, and leave that as a garnish. And also, another thing that goes really well with rhubarb is mint. So you can have the mint on there as well. So that is the Ruby Sparkle.
And that's all the time that we have today here at the Heartwood Farm and Cidery. I'd like to thank Brent and Bill for taking us around this lovely farming area, visiting all the animals, tasting some really refreshing alcohol, and having a really great afternoon here on the property. We'd like to encourage you to visit them here at the Heartwood Farm and Cidery, taste some of their cideries, ask them a little bit about what it is that they do here. And if you want more information about the Wellington County Museum and Archives or our County Cocktails video series, just visit us at wellington.ca/museum, and we'll see you next time.